It's time once again for the FNBO Friday Feeders, brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. I'm Susan Littlefield. We are going to head out to Milford area where we're going to learn more about Wehrs Feed Yard. Austin Schweitzer talks about the operation and starts with the expansion.
It was a 1,000-head feed yard for a lot of years since the 80s. My Uncle Bob and Grandpa kind of started it. And then the last 3 years, we have expanded it to around 4,000 head and went through the DEQ processes and made it quite a bit bigger and trying to keep making it more efficient each day.
So you talk about going through that process. It's something anybody has to with expanding an operation. What advice would you give to somebody out there who's looking to do an expansion? And what can
My advice is use your local experts. There's two companies that come to mind or in the area that do this for a living. And obviously it costs some capital, costs some money to work with them, but they have the processes down. They'll help you cross the T's and dot the I's and go through every process you need to get stuff submitted, get the DEQ out there. If there's ever some sort of a rye problem where you need another solution, or maybe another option to change something, they would be the company that has probably been through that before. So before you think you have no other solution, they're a great help. And they also help with all the records that you need to have available to provide.
What do you like about being involved in the cattle industry like you are?
I don't know. I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are born with it, right? So for me, it was always the cow-calf and loving that side of it and still heavily involved in that, producing bulls every year. But then once you get into that, it's like, well, where do they go after you sell them at the sale barn? And then once you see that, and you take them all the way to packer, it's like, well, I just as well be involved in the whole process, I guess. And so that's kind of how it's evolved for me after years of working in a corporate job, which is fine, which is great. The passion just eventually kind of tore me back, and that's where we ended up.
So you kind of like going from a desk job to a feedlot, being around livestock job every day. I'm sure a different kind of pace, but something you truly enjoy.
Yeah, I was never good at sitting behind a desk, but even now I try and designate one hard day a week because the business side of a feed yard is probably more important than out there on the day-to-day side. So we try and wrangle that in too. But definitely a change of pace. There's always something. You can be organized and have a set agenda for the day, and by the first 2 hours you're taking a right turn because something broke or something's sick or the agenda kind of makes itself and molds itself each day at a feed yard, that's for sure.
Family still heavily involved with you? You talked about your uncle and your grandfather.
No, grandfather passed many years ago, and uncle, I think, sometimes feed yards can be a burnout. And so I think he was ready to turn it over to the younger crowd and kind of enjoy the next stage of his life. And so it's now just me and local guys that are farm kids, which eventually turned into family, in my opinion, anyway. And so we're enjoying working and building it together with them.
Unfortunately, we've all had to, with livestock, had to go through this cold snap. What are some things that you guys did at the feedlot to keep those cattle as comfortable as possible and still keep their appetite up to eat?
So the big thing we do is we do a lot of bedding, and some guys are against that. Creates more manure. It's expensive. But even during the heat, believe it or not, a lot of that heat comes from the ground. So we will even bed in the summer when it's really hot.